Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Welcome to it. Tuesdays here. It's Hail Varsity Radio presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, Go Currency. Visit gocurrency.com for more information. It's Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark taking you through this Tuesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio as Chris Schmidt has the day off today. He is being a chauffeur as he's got to take his wife to and from a routine doctor's appointment and was forced to miss a show today. Now, I don't know, that sounds like it's a little insignificant, especially on a day like Valentine's Day, but I tend to believe Schmitty.
I mean, you can't go the golf route today, unfortunately.
No,
it's
way
too
too
rainy. But usually that's the way that we would go, probably, is the golf route. Maybe yesterday, but
with Valentine's Day today, it does send the alarm bells going. So Schmitty, if you're listening, maybe we need some proof of you at the doctor's office. I kid. But it's Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark taking you through the show today. Schmitty will be back tomorrow. He'll actually be back tonight for our local listeners as he's got a high school basketball game over on KFR. Maybe that's all the proof we need that it's not Valentine's Day plans, as he is getting back to work tonight as he will have the Lincoln Southwest boys in action tonight, 7:30 opening tip. For our local listeners, that's here in Lincoln over on our sister station, 1240 KFOR. In the meantime, Connor and myself taking you through this Valentine's Day edition today as we've got a big show planned. Mitch Sherman's going to be joining us here in about 20 minutes. Mitch from The Athletic, we're going to get his take on the walk-on program, the reduction in size, what it means, doing a little bit of reading in between the lines there. We'll have Mitch in 20 minutes to talk about that. We'll have Andy Markowski leading off hour 2 to talk about Husker basketball as they're on the road tonight in Piscataway taking on Rutgers from the RAC, which has been a very tough place to go win. We'll get Andy's thoughts on the game tonight, and we'll also have some thoughts on Dylan Raiola with Georgia. Changing offensive coordinators, what does that mean for Nebraska? We'll get into that a little bit later this hour. And then also another quarterback in the news today, Derek Carr. He's out as a Las Vegas Raider, and we're going to get our reaction into that here in just a little bit more. I want to start this off, Connor, is the tragedy that occurred last night up at Michigan State, a Big Ten brethren, and just awful news to be hearing about that last night. Just want to start off this show by saying our hearts are with Michigan State right now, as I know they're 48-hour cancellation to classes, all athletic events and whatnot. There's a lot of things more important than sports right now, and that is one of those things that is a heartbreaking, tragic story. And I just wanted to lead off this show by saying that our hearts are with the Spartans and Michigan State today, as I know we have some loyal listeners up in Michigan as well who are nearer and dearer to East Lansing than we are. But that was just news that broke last night, really broke my heart to see, and that's where I wanted to lead the show off. Yeah,
it was really unfortunate situation, and I mean, I know a couple of people who go to school there as well, and just kind of getting that text about, like, hey, this is happening is, I mean, obviously one that you never want to get, but luckily everybody that I know personally was okay, and I know there were some casualties, but yeah, just a terrible situation, and we hope that, everything gets better up there, and we're all thinking about, the East Lansing community as a whole, but obviously especially the Michigan State, family, and obviously they're in the Big Ten as well, and so just kind of that Big Ten community coming out as well. So that's, I guess, a positive to come out of this, but obviously a terrible situation, and we wish, the Spartans nothing but the best going forward.
Yeah, now our hearts are heavy, but I do also understand the place of sports in life, and for a lot of people, that's to get away from the sad stories in life. And I know there's been plenty of them around the United States, sad, weird, whatever you want to call it, heartbreaking, a little bit of everything over the past couple weeks here in America. I know sports is the getaway for a lot of people, myself included, and let's get into sports, Connor, as we move away from that. And I'd like to get away from the Valentine's Day subject as well today, because Lord knows I don't got no Valentine to go home to tonight.
Hey, you know what? I'm right there with you. So
it's kind of better this way, right?
I mean,
a lot less stress. In my opinion, not being somebody who is married or with Valentine kind of seems like a crappy holiday. I would use a stronger word there, but I'm not allowed to. Not my favorite holiday. We'll move on, though, from Valentine's Day and get into Husker footballs. We've got plenty to talk about. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about that reduction in the walk-on program that's forthcoming. I said a little earlier we're going to be talking about that with Mitch, but we do have some strength and conditioning news to get into as football season's over. The Super Bowl ended on Sunday, and now all eyes look forward to next season. For NFL teams, we get into the nitty-gritty of scouting, the draft combine, the upcoming NFL draft, building that roster for next year. We already see the Raiders making a move like that today with Derek Carr. But for college football with the Huskers, it's that winter conditioning program in Nebraska with a new regiment this season as they get ready for spring football. It's Corey Campbell, and I was talking with Connor before the show today. I got the swear jar ready right next to me here today with Corey Campbell. It's been tough for me because you have Corey Campbell, you have Evan Cooper, and I've found myself commonly referring to Corey Campbell as Corey Cooper, noted Husker safety from the end of the Bo Pelini years. So I got my swear jar ready. Connor, you better keep me in check here in case I were to say Corey Cooper. But this is Corey Campbell we're referring to, Nebraska strength and conditioning coach. He sat down with Jessica Cootie on Sports Nightly last night and gave some thoughts into the Husker strength and conditioning program, what he learned from the NFL. And obviously there's a lot more to that interview that we can't get into all of it today. So we encourage you, if you want to go check it out, the Husker Radio Network posted that up on their YouTube page last night. Jessica Cootie sit down with Corey Campbell. But he got into plenty with Jessica, and I want to look first at just his overall vision for the strength and conditioning program. It's going to be, at least from a Husker fans hope, a departure from Zach Duval, because you think back to the Zach Duval tenure at Nebraska, and on paper, at least what you saw from the outside, is these guys looked like absolute monsters, and that's, I think, why they got the moniker. We had the one anonymous Big Ten coach last offseason called Nebraska the all-bus team, because when they get off the bus, they look like a bunch of killers. They look like great football players, and then you get them on the field, and you just wait for them to shoot themselves in the foot. So the Zach Duval program built guys who looked scary as football players. They looked like they were mean. They looked like they were ready to go, and now Corey Campbell steps in, and he's got a different vision for Husker football strength and conditioning, and he got into that yesterday, his vision overall for the strength and conditioning program for Nebraska, not only here through these winter months, but in a long-term vision goal as well.
The way in which we do program on our perspective is long-term athletic development, right? When you walk in the door, your programming shouldn't look the same as when you leave out 3, 4, or 5 years from now, right? So it is focusing our efforts on the things that are going to allow you to progress where you are, all right? We got to meet you where you're at, you know, and that looks different over time. So through testing and assessment, right, with our sports science staff, the NAPL, we can identify, hey, where you are as an athlete and what factors do we need to address in your training to get you to be a better football player, because that's what those guys are here to be. They're here to be really good football players, right? And through the weight room, that's an avenue in which you can be that. So from a developmental standpoint, right, it's understanding where you are as an athlete, you know, with respect to your training age and what we need to accomplish for you to be able to play healthy, successful seasons here for 3, 4, or 5 years.
And one of the things he said along with that was that Nebraska, the strength and conditioning program, is not here to build weightlifters. It's not guys that put up a whole bunch of weight in the gym. Obviously, that's important, but more importantly, it is building football players. And I think that is kind of the big difference, just from the outside looking in, of what we see between Zach Duval's program and the early reports out of Corey Campbell's strength and conditioning program. Is with Zach Duval, as I said earlier, you think about what these guys look like in the weight room. They looked like absolute animals, but I think Corey Cooper's... I did it right there. There's one in the swear jar. Corey Campbell, I think what he's saying here is, you know what? We don't care about these guys looking good. We care about these guys playing good.
Well, can we change the narrative of being the all-bus team to the all-field team? Because that would, just be a big step in the right direction. But, yeah, you don't just want to look like football players. Obviously, that goes, some of the distance. But you got to apply that strength that you get in the off-season to the football field. And I think so far, just what we've been able to see from, social media and all the videos and, different types of media that you've been able to see of what this team is doing in the weight room and, competition-wise as well. I think that's a big thing because it's kind of underrated, especially in the weight room as well. Obviously, practice is a competition each and every single day. But when your mind is always in that, competition mind state, whether that's weightlifting, whether that's conditioning, whether that's even in school, right? Mm-hmm. If you have that competition mindset as an athlete more times than not, you're just going to develop that as second nature, and that's going to kick in when you really need it on the football field. And that's something that in the past handful of years that this team has lacked, and especially when they need it most. I mean, you go back to 2021, the competition mindset, obviously so close so many times. How many times could that have pushed you over the edge and put those losses into wins, at least some of them? So I really like that component of things, especially in the weight room too, because, I mean, obviously you're there to get stronger and get better at football, but when you're competing against the guy right next to you who's in the same position group as you, who's fighting for that same spot, I mean, you're competing all the time. I think that could pay huge dividends when it comes to August and September.
Yeah, and Coach Campbell got into how the weight room, not only does it build better athletes, but it also builds some intangibles, and that's one of the things they're trying to build here through winter conditioning.
Brotherhood is built through shared struggle, right? So, that's one of our main priorities this spring is to build a brotherhood, right? So myself and my staff, we have to put these guys in situations where we really see, how they're going to handle adversity. Are they going to come together as a group, all right, or will there be, any dissension, right? And at that point, we have to assess and correct, right? Like, we put them in certain situations in a control setting so that when they do get to spring ball, when they do get to fall camp, when they do get to the season, it's not the first time they face that, right? Building the brotherhood through shared struggle during this time allows, when it's time to strap the helmets on and you go out there as a group, right, you've gone through that. You've experienced what you've had to experience so that it's not an issue at that point in time. So that is huge, and it gives you the winner to do that, right? Like the guys, they're in there to training, they see each other work. They can also see whether or not, someone isn't giving the effort that they need to give in order to be the program that we want to be. So from an accountability factor, it's huge for right now, but also in these guys understanding that, hey, go through the experiences now so that when it's time to play ball, we're past that point and we can be the team that we want to be in the fall.
So there's Corey Cooper on what they're trying to build through winter conditioning, at least from an intangible point of view. Here's more from Cooper on what they want to build athletically through winter conditioning, trying to get these guys ready for spring football.
It's essentially preparing them for what's coming with spring ball, right? Like, and that's how you got to look at it. So, for us, we have to make the strides in getting these guys as strong as we can get them, adding the mass that we need to add, moving well, right? Movement quality is of the utmost importance, and also conditioning their tissues to be able to handle, what's coming with spring ball, right? Like the main priority for us is to keep these guys as healthy as we can so that they can play the game of football, right? So we look at, from a running standpoint, from a workload standpoint, like what is it that they're going to have to be prepared for, and then we reverse engineer that. So on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, right, in our running volume and our lifting volume, it's preparing them to undertake the demands of spring ball. And then once we get to the spring ball phase, we reassess and evaluate what we need to do to help them be healthy and resilient through that period. And then, each subsequent period after that, we do the same thing. Evaluate what we're preparing them for and then prepare them for that.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but you owe about 3 more quarters to the swear jar.
Did I keep on doing it?
Yeah.
Oh, no. You should have stopped me. You should have jumped in.
Oh, I just wanted to let it happen.
Well, see, that's like my upbringing of Husker football, was especially those Bo Pelini years, and all those players just stick out so distinctly in my memory that I told you right whenever we let it off that this is going to happen. I am going to call him Corey Cooper when it's Corey Campbell.
I mean, you owe about $1 worth of quarters right now, and we're in segment 1. I mean, we've got 7 more, so I'm really curious. Yeah, there it is.
Got 3 quarters in hand. We're setting them to the side. Whoever is in here producing high school sports next can use those to go buy themselves a Coke at some point. But what'd you hear there from Corey Campbell? Got it that time. Is that, we're preparing these guys for the rigors of spring football, and to think back to notorious quote city from Scott Frost, those offensive linemen throwing up during fall camp. At the time, there was like, is this guy trying to just prove a point by exaggerating and saying, oh, we got guys throwing up every single practice, and that's showing how hard they're working? Or is there an element of truth to that, in that these offensive linemen weren't quite prepared for the rigors of fall camp? Regardless, it's just interesting to hear it coming out of the strength and conditioning coach's mouth that, yeah, we're trying to build better football players here, but at the end of the day, it's about preparing them for spring football and preparing them to go hit that practice field and let Matt Rhule turn them into football players. It's about developing the base for the coaching staff to go work with, and if they're not ready for the rigors of spring football, then we haven't done our job.
Well, yeah, either way, it's a fault of the coaching staff that they're not ready for spring football. I don't know if that was necessarily the case under the Frost administration, but yeah, getting them ready for that next stage of the year. Because when you think about it, I mean, winter football is a part of the year. That's like one stage, if you will, or a chapter, if you will.
It's the first step towards building wins in the fall.
Right, and then you get into spring. That's a chapter. Then you get into summer, and that's really the final one of the off season. And then, boom, you're off and running in fall camp, and you go straight into the season. So, getting your guys prepared for spring ball, it's a little, kind of overlooked sometimes, but having them prepared, being prepared all year round is something invaluable.
So thoughts from Corey Campbell here in our first segment as he's talking strength and conditioning. We'll have more from him a little bit later this hour, as well as some thoughts on Dylan Raiola, his recruitment. Georgia switching offensive coordinators as Todd Monken's off to Baltimore. We'll have more thoughts on that. But next, we'll have Mitch Sherman, the Athletic, joining us here on Hail Varsity Radio.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Tuesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio here. It's Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark filling in for Chris Schmidt, who's got the day off taking care of his lovely wife, and I'm sure also enjoying his Valentine's Day, as he'll be back with us tomorrow on this show. But for now, it's Connor and myself, and we're excited to welcome in Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. And Mitch, Valentine's Day, yay or nay? We had a comment in from Dion a little bit earlier saying he's been married for 40 years and that Valentine's Day is absolutely the worst, most stupid holiday ever invented. I think Connor and I are both in agreement, both of us being single here. So I want to get your take. Valentine's Day, yay or nay?
Well, I definitely don't have 40 years of marriage, but I have 20, which is half of that. So, yeah, I think it reaches a point where if you have a good relationship,
choose
I think
your
it reaches
words
a
wisely.
point where you are in agreement on how this day works, and it can be big or it can be not much at all. And here, at least this year, it's not going to be a whole lot. We went out to dinner on Saturday. Yeah, Saturday night. Had a nice dinner. Avoided the Valentine's commercialization, and that, I guess, on whatever it was, February 11th or 10th was our pre-Super Bowl Valentine's Day. Tonight, just a regular eat-at-home night.
And when you say that, is it going to be heart-shaped pizza order out? Is that your style?
No, I don't think so. I don't even know what it is yet. It's 4:30, and we're just living by the hour, as is normal.
Mitch Sherman's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. And Mitch, the topic of, well, I guess I'll say the weekend, and something Schmidt and I hit on a lot yesterday, was the news that Nebraska has plans to reduce the size of the walk-on program here over the next couple seasons. And it's labeled as a way in order to get Nebraska back within Title IX compliance. But my take is that there's probably other ways for Nebraska to become Title IX compliant if they so chose to do so. But whenever you look at this, it almost feels like, at least to me, Trev Albert's taking a little bit of pressure off of Matt Rhule, with Matt Rhule saying, you know what, walk-on program's a little bit bloated. We probably don't need it with Title IX. And Trev saying, this is going to come from the athletic director, at least in the news release. And that's just how I'm reading in between the lines. So I want to get your take on that with Nebraska's plans to reduce the size of the walk-on program here over the next couple seasons.
Yeah, I think it's a collaboration between the two of them. And I talked to Trev last week and have a story coming out tomorrow, not about the walk-on program specifically, but about the new facility and the functionality of the new facility and how Nebraska, Trev Alberts, and Matt Rhule in particular plan to use this building to help elevate the program and get Nebraska back where they believe it should be in college football. And some of that involves roster size, and Nebraska could have accommodated a large roster, but 150 players is not in Matt Rhule's vision of what a functional, and I think that word comes up, functionality with the the facility, functional with what he wants to do in his program. 150 players is not within his vision of what a functional program looks like when it's operating most efficiently. Matt Rhule is not here to do away with walk-ons by any stretch. As he's quick to let you know, he was himself a walk-on at Penn State. His football career exists only because of the opportunities that are afforded to walk-ons, and he wants to give walk-ons at Nebraska the kind of opportunity that he had as a player at Penn State. So what I think you'll see is while there are fewer walk-ons on the roster, and you might eventually get down to a roster size that's more in line with what's normal around the Big Ten and maybe 120 players. So that's still 35 walk-ons on top of the 85 scholarship players. Those players are going to have opportunities and things at their disposal that are in line with what the scholarship players get. And that I would not say that has been the case in recent years at Nebraska or in the history at Nebraska. Walk-ons have had to earn their keep, and they've been in a different locker room. They've at times been treated differently. Now they have the opportunity to get up to the starting lineup and be major contributors and get to the NFL and do things that scholarship players do. But it's I think the new Nebraska under Matt Rhule with walk-ons, the opportunities are going to be there from the beginning for these players, as opposed to them coming in and being tackling dummies until they beat the odds and earn their keep. It'll still be a challenge. There will still be much required of them to make an impact on the program on the field on Saturdays, but where they start, where they begin their careers, isn't going to look the same.
Mitch, you wrote a great story at the end of last week about Matt Rhule's love for Nebraska and how his efforts out in the recruiting trail are growing him a fan base within the state of Nebraska just because of, how much he's working to, I shouldn't say to get the fans of Nebraska to love him, but just to put himself out there as a person that can relate to the state of Nebraska. And I want to get your take. Does reducing the size of the walk-on program fly in the face of his love for Nebraska just because of how much Nebraskans love the walk-on program and how much they love even individual walk-ons, people that they're proud of, whether it be a nephew, someone within their hometown, a former high school teammate? Do you think that flies in the face of what Matt Rhule's doing, trying to show his love to the state of Nebraska?
Well, if he was going to go and cut the entire walk-on program, then I'd say yes, but that's not what we're looking at. As I said, you're going to have 30 or 35, maybe 40, probably more this year, walk-ons on the roster. And most of those players are going to be from Nebraska. So the opportunity for Nebraska players who go unrecruited and don't get the scholarship attention that they would desire is still going to be there for the top-line players to walk on at Nebraska. And you see that in this 2023 class. I think you'll see it in the next class in 2024. The majority of the walk-ons in the first group that Matt Rhule signed are from Nebraska high school. So that opportunity is still there. And like I said, I think when those guys get to campus and they get into that new building and they are a part of the Nebraska program, the experience for walk-ons, because there is a smaller number of them, is going to be a better one than it was in previous times at Nebraska with Nebraska football. Look, college football is not the same as it ever was. Things have changed, and the reality of bringing in 35 or 40 kids who aren't on scholarship, it's just it isn't the same as it was when Tom Osborne or Frank Solich coached, and it didn't work with Scott Frost in that way. So I think that the adjustment that you see here in going to a smaller roster, and again, it's not a 90-man roster, it's probably going to be a 120-player roster, is one that's not only beneficial for the kind of program that Matt Rhule wants to run, it's also most efficient when considering everything that exists in college football today, with opportunities for players who might have once been walk-ons at Nebraska to go play in the FCS or do other things with their careers.
Mitch Sherman is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. Mitch, I agree because you reduce the amount of walk-ons, and it seems like that the experience for them is going to be more positive. And it also felt like, especially under the Frost administration, that the roster was just like overwhelmingly big with the amount of walk-ons that were on that roster. So, to me, I think it's a good thing. I understand that the tradition is rich, and I'm a little bit newer to it, but I mean, in the long haul, and you said it best, I mean, college football is different now, and it's a lot harder as a walk-on, too, to kind of get that starting shot with the transfer portal, NIL, and all that.
I think a lot of people wanted to romanticize things in recent years and feel like a 150-player roster under Scott Frost was the same thing as a 150-player roster under Tom Osborne, and it just wasn't, in part because of things that were outside of the coaching staff's control at Nebraska, like the changing face of college football, and in part because of the way that the program was run. If you're a walk-on and you don't practice and you stand there and watch practice 5 days a week, you never get out there and get the opportunity with the top players to compete. Is that really the situation that you want for walk-ons, or do you want all your walk-ons to have an opportunity on some level? They're still going to have to earn their way, but I think the second option is best, and that seems to be the direction that Nebraska's trending.
Mitch, last thought here on the walk-ons before we move on. Do you think Matt Rule's own personal history, being a walk-on at Penn State, will affect how the walk-on program is run moving forward? I don't think has there ever been another Husker coach who they themselves were a walk-on to a football program? I can't think of one off the top of my head.
That's a great question. Frank Solich kind of had the story of a walk-on as somebody who was undersized and maybe was an underdog at times, a little fullback, but I believe out of Pennsylvania, coming to play for Bob Devaney, he was a scholarship player. And you go through the list, and obviously Scott Frost was a super high profile recruit, and those are the only guys who played at Nebraska, in the modern era of college football. Of course, Matt Rule was at Penn State. I don't know the situation necessarily. I mean, we can get down and talk about Mike Riley and Bill Callahan and all those guys and what their thoughts were on walk-ons, what their history was as players. They're all different. They're all going to bring their own experiences. Elijah, I do think that his experience, that Matt Rule's experience as a walk-on at Penn State in the 90s, will help shape it'll help shape the experience that walk-ons have at Nebraska, and will ensure that they continue to be valued. He's lived it firsthand. He's been a head coach for long enough now that I think we know he's not going to change 1 or 2 years into this thing and all of a sudden look at walk-ons in a different kind of way. He values them. There are a number of players on his staff who were walk-ons either for him at Temple or at other places, like Corey Campbell, the strength coach, who was a walk-on at Georgia. So he wants to help shape the lives of these players, and that's not going to stop as this thing continues in Lincoln.
Mitch, last thought here before we get you out, and we really appreciate your time here this afternoon. Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monken on his way to Baltimore, and I think a lot of Husker fans reading in between the lines here with Dylan Raiola, as well as Georgia offering another quarterback within the past week and a half or so. What is your reaction to that news?
Well, Dylan Raiola has an established relationship with Georgia and its coaching staff. And in my conversations with Dylan, and I wrote about him a couple weeks ago and spent some time with him and his family in Arizona, Todd Monken, the OC at Georgia, he didn't come up in our talks when the subject went to Georgia. He talked more about others there in Athens and Kirby Smart, the head coach. So, it doesn't help, I would imagine, to have a change, and not just the OC, but Monken coached the quarterbacks for Georgia, and you see, as you mentioned, you see this Georgia recruiting class for 2024 taking shape, and there's a quarterback commitment among that group that Georgia has, and they've made another offer to an in-state player. So all of those things can be analyzed, and you can say, well, this helps Nebraska, and because clearly Georgia is one of the main competitors to get his commitment here in the next few months with Nebraska and USC. But it's, I don't know I haven't talked to him about this specific situation or anybody in his family. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. I think Georgia, they immediately elevated Mike Bobo, who was on staff when as an analyst when Georgia began its recruitment of Dylan Raiola. So, it's not going to be an entirely new face for him when they go back to Georgia next month. we'll just have to see how it plays out. Nebraska's going to get its shot at the end of March to have him on campus, and it may be that Nebraska's shot there in March is the last one, the last look that he takes at campus before he commits. It's possible that he'll want to make his decision around April 1st, and if that's the case, you like the position that Nebraska's in as the last one to be able to take a crack at him.
Mitch Sherman's with us here. Find him on Twitter at Mitch Sherman. And Mitch, appreciate your time here on a Tuesday. Enjoy your Valentine's Day Eve, all right?
All right, thanks. Same to you guys.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Tuesday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio presented by Currency. Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark taking you through the show today. Schmitty's got the day off. He will be back for the Wednesday edition coming your way tomorrow from 4 to 6. If you're on the phone lines, hang with us. I'll get to your phone call here in just 1 second. But we finished off with Mitch Sherman there, a little bit over on time. So got to start off this segment by apologizing to our affiliates, anyone listening across the state. We shortchanged you probably about the last 30 seconds of Mitch Sherman's answer. So we do apologize for that. I didn't want to cut him off. You can catch the rest of his answer regarding Dylan Raiola in podcast form if you missed it. Or you can hang around with us here. We're going to get into that here just right now. And Connor, did you see this news this morning of Georgia's offensive coordinator? That's Todd Monken on his way to go be the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator. And what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, it's interesting because we all saw that Georgia, they went ahead and offered a different 2024 QB, and everybody was kind of making a big deal about that. I don't know how much weight that holds. I feel like this move holds maybe a little bit more when it comes to the recruitment, at least, of Dylan Raiola, just because I get it. Kirby Smart's probably going to bring up somebody that's already within the program and knows the system and everything, but it's still a change, especially in an important position on the coaching staff that Dylan Raiola will have to, lean on in college as well. So the fact that Nebraska now has a little bit more of a, consistency advantage over Georgia when it comes to the recruitment of Dylan Raiola is important. I don't know how much it changes, but I think it holds a little bit more weight than Georgia offering another 2024 QB.
And Dylan Raiola does have a relationship with new Georgia offense coordinator Mike Bobo. We'll get to that here in just a second. But first, got to get to the phone lines. Mo's been hanging along patiently with us. Mo, welcome in to Hail Varsity Radio. Go ahead.
How you doing?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I was listening to you talk about the walk-ons and stuff, and I've been at this for 73 years, so I've seen it all. But I don't really care if there's 5 walk-ons or 50. But what really irks me, and what I'd like to hear from you guys is, are they going to stop giving away all the good players to places like Iowa, and then they come back and torture us with tight ends and linebackers and stuff that came right out of Nebraska? So I'd like to hear what you got to say on that.
Mo, thanks for the phone call today. And we kind of hit on this in the show a little bit yesterday. We'll get back to Dylan Raiola here in just a second, but I want to give Mo his due. It comes down to that evaluation topic, and it's with the walk-on program. The way moving forward is going to be quality over quantity. Do you trust your evaluation enough in order to make sure that A, who a scholarship guy is, who a scholarship guy isn't, and B, you make sure you get those guys to Nebraska? And we've already seen the legwork with this coaching staff going and really hitting all corners of Nebraska, making sure you're establishing relationships with high school coaches so you're going to have a leg up on any potential in-state kid that's going to crop up here over the next couple of years. You have a leg up on the likes of Iowa, South Dakota State, South Dakota, Northwest Missouri State, Colorado. I mean, name a program in the Midwest. The previous relationship is where this coaching staff wants to have a leg up, and then moving forward, it comes down to talent evaluation. Do you know who a scholarship guy is and who a scholarship guy isn't? That's the simple fact of the matter. If they're going to be extending a preferred walk-on offer to a kid, it's essentially telling the kid, we don't think you're a scholarship player here at Nebraska. Now, we could have our opinions changed. You could come here and perform and earn your way into a scholarship, and we'll admit that we were wrong, but through our talent evaluation, which we trust, we're saying if you do end up going off to one of those schools, we don't think that it's going to come back and bite us. So I think that's what this staff is going to say moving forward. Either you deserve a spot on this Husker football team, in which case you deserve a scholarship, or we're okay with letting you go somewhere else. And you know what? If you want to be a Husker, we'll give you that preferred walk-on opportunity. You can come try to make it work. But if you are an in-state kid and we think you're worthy of being on the team, I think they're saying, you know what, you get a scholarship offer. We're not going to be throwing out preferred walk-on offers to kids we think are going to be on the line. Either you are or you aren't, and it comes down to talent evaluation.
Well, I think Mitch said it in the last segment probably the best. And when you have guys sitting there 5 days a week in practice watching, not even dressing, just watching, then you have a problem. Because at a certain point, what is the point of just getting walk-ons to keep players away from other universities? Because down the road, how much is that going to help you as well? Because, okay, if you lose out on a scholarship guy to, say, in Iowa or in Oklahoma or whatever, that's just kind of how the card falls sometimes when, you're doing recruiting. And,
I mean, that happened in the 90s as well. You would lose guys. It would happen.
It happens to every school, not just Nebraska, too. And just to get walk-ons just to have players so other schools can't get them, that's probably not the reason, but it sure looks like it at some points. And again, when you have guys literally sitting there and watching practice 5 days a week, that's not helping them. That's not helping your team because they're not getting the reps either. And these guys, they could be out there being on the scout team or something. You have too many guys, and it just becomes congested. I believe you said it earlier, different locker rooms and just not a great experience as a collegiate athlete, maybe even being treated differently. Then there's a problem. And so shrinking the amount of walk-ons, I don't have an issue with whatsoever. Again, I know it's a tradition thing, and I understand that in other areas as well, but it's just an area of the team that isn't making that much of a difference right now in my eyes.
Well, it's about finding the one guy out of the 30 that you bring in. Who's going to be the Luke Reimer? Who is going to be the Brandon Riley? Who's going to be that walk-on that steps up and proves everybody wrong? And I think it's just about riding that fine line. You don't want to be the school that has a congested walk-on program. They're just giving a preferred walk-on offer to anybody and everybody because you're going to have issues that way. But you also want to swing to the other end of the pendulum, which is, I think, what it felt like during the Mike Riley years, during the Bo Pelini years, which was, you're an in-state kid. We don't need to give you a scholarship offer. We can just give you a preferred walk-on offer, and you'll come here because you want to play for Nebraska. Right. That's not the right way to go about it either. You have to ride that fine line of with talent evaluation saying, you know what, we think this is a guy that can play at Nebraska, therefore we give you a scholarship. If you think a guy can play at Nebraska, what I've seen from this new staff is you get that scholarship offer. I don't care if nobody else in the country is offering you. If we think you can play at Nebraska, you're going to get that offer. And I think of a guy coming out of Omaha like Jalen Lloyd. A guy that this staff thinks can play football at Nebraska, and the rest of the country might not think that, but I think that's a guy that under previous staffs would have gotten that preferred walk-on offer. Yeah, you're a great track kid. We don't know what you got on the football field, so we're going to give you a preferred walk-on offer. This staff is going away from that. They're saying, if we think you can play at Nebraska, you get the scholarship offer, and we're not going to jack around with, oh, here's a preferred walk-on offer. You're a great Husker fan. Come play for Nebraska. It's a preferred walk-on, and give us more leeway. It's about riding that fine line, and it remains to be seen what Matt Rhule's plan is for walk-ons, but I think his experience as a walk-on is going to lead him in the right direction.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down hour one here. It's Hail Varsity Radio presented by Currency. Is a good show. We're about halfway through here. We heard from Mitch Sherman about 20 minutes ago, and we'll be hearing from Andy Markowski here leading off hour two. But before we get there, got to finish off a topic of conversation that Connor and I briefly got into here last segment. That's Dylan Raiola. As a lot of Husker fans out there trying to read some tea leaves today as Georgia's offensive coordinator Todd Monken taking the offensive coordinator job with the Baltimore Ravens, going and working with, believe it or not, a younger quarterback than the one he had at Georgia. How crazy is that? Lamar Jackson's a couple months younger than Stetson Bennett, which is just boggles my mind to think about that he's going off to Baltimore, and the joke out there today was, well, he just wants a younger quarterback to work with, someone he can mold a little bit better. Regardless, Todd Monken did great things to that Georgia offense over the past couple of years. There's been a lot of Georgia fans bemoaning this, but they bring in Mike Bobo. And why this factors in to the Dylan Raiola recruitment is that Mike Bobo is the same guy who developed Matt Stafford at Georgia. And you think about, why is that important? Well, you go off to Matt Stafford's professional career, where he played for the Detroit Lions. Who is his center in Detroit? None other but Dominic Raiola, who's a good friend. And it sounds like all accounts would point to the fact that Matthew Stafford has a very high opinion of Mike Bobo, and that Matt Stafford and Dominic Raiola remain at least acquaintances to this day, and there's the influence of Matt Stafford there, who's a big fan of Mike Bobo. Also, we have from Blaine Gilmer of UGAsports.com. He sat down with Dylan Raiola last month, and it sounds like this is not a surprise to Dylan Raiola, this move. It sounds like he already knew that should Monken leave, head off to the NFL, that Mike Bobo was going to be the offensive coordinator. It's not something that Dylan was fearing. I mean, Mike Bobo was helping out in this recruitment all the way through anyway. Monken was listed as the head recruiter, but the secondary recruiter, not only was it Kirby Smart, it was also Mike Bobo. So it's somebody that Dylan Raiola already has a relationship with.
You know, Coach Monken and Coach Smart, they've been transparent with all these interviews going on, and you know, I'm happy for Coach Monken that he's able to go interview with NFLs, and you know, he's earned that, and he deserves it. He won 2 back-to-back natties, and you know, I wouldn't say change things, but it would definitely be something to look at. I know Coach Smart has the next guy. If Coach Monken were to move on, he has the next guy in the system already, you know, ready to step in and fill those shoes right away.
And the thing I hear there is that it doesn't necessarily change things. It could. He's got to come down and rebuild a relationship with Bobo, knowing that Bobo would be your offensive coordinator. But if I am reading the tea leaves here, I don't think this improves Nebraska's stock. I don't think it decreases Nebraska's chances at Raiola. I think this is very much we're holding steady. And it really puts, I don't want to say Georgia in the same place as Nebraska, because the program they have there is head and shoulders above what Nebraska has at the moment. But it comes down to building relationships with the new staff. And similar to Nebraska, there's a relationship with this Nebraska staff. Obviously, that relationship is still growing because you've only had a couple months. It's a similar situation with Mike Bobo. You are aware of Mike Bobo. You've had conversations with Mike Bobo. Now it's time to treat this recruitment as if he is going to be your offensive coordinator, the guy developing you moving forward. So what does it mean for Nebraska as of right now? As I read the tea leaves, this is not well, Nebraska now jumps up to the top spot. In the words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. Not so fast. Does it change things? Potentially. But as of right now, I think it's a footnote to the recruitment of Dylan Raiola rather than a main story. So that's what I have on Dylan Raiola. We're going to switch gears, talk some Husker basketball. Leading off hour 2 is former Husker standout, current assistant with the Pius girls basketball program, Andy Markowski, joins to talk Nebraska, Wisconsin, and what looms tonight as Nebraska heads out to Piscataway.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Back in, it's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark taking you through the show today. Schmitty's got the day off as we spent most of hour 1 talking Husker football. Corey Campbell, Dylan Raiola. We switch gears now, talk some Husker basketball as we welcome in former Husker Andy Markowski. And Andy doesn't quite feel like what it should feel like as we get ready for district basketball and NCAA tournament, which is this warm weather we've had about the past week or so. How are you doing today?
Not too bad, but anytime we have warm weather in February, I'll take it.
Andy, before we look ahead to what Nebrasketball faces tonight with Rutgers, let's go back quickly to Saturday. Nebraska overcoming their largest deficit since 2013. That was whenever they came back against Iowa, and they eliminate that deficit, take down Wisconsin on Saturday. I want to get some of your takeaways from that game. Kisei, he started the game slow, but really came into his own in the second half, and then a huge performance from Blaze in the second half as well, especially on the defensive side of the ball, as the Huskers steal one from Wisconsin and maybe knock them off that bubble.
Yeah, certainly. I don't know what we're playing for, whether it be an NIT or just to eliminate teams from being on the bubble, right? We had a big win against Penn State, and now probably took Wisconsin off the bubble. But, yeah, just credit to a tough, gritty second half. K-State, Tominaga is really helping them offensively. Once they lost their better defensive wings, I didn't know if they'd be able to score enough to beat the top half of the league. But Tominaga has found ways to score. And then, as you mentioned, I thought ability to play Blaze, Keita, and Walker together against Wisconsin's front line really changed what they were doing offensively. And just a credit to Fred's group that they stayed the course and got a good home win.
Andy Markowski is with us on Hail Varsity Radio tonight. Andy, Nebraska goes to Rutgers, a place where Rutgers has been very, very good at home ever since 2019, 27-8 at the rack ever since that season. What do you see from Nebraska here? How do you like their chances tonight?
Yeah, certainly Rutgers it's just so physical, and losing some of our physicality to injury and having to play some freshmen. That's a little unnerving. They're top of the league in defense. We've done a pretty good job of rebounding, but Rutgers' physicality, has them in the top 3 or 4 in the league. And rebounding, they're pretty balanced offensively. We've shown the ability to hang in on the road. Even the Michigan game, I think we got off to a really slow start, but settled in, and I think cut that game back to 7 or 8. But it's going to take a good offensive effort. Having Keita back in this game will help as well. I think his physicality and his size, ability to protect the rim and rebound, could be a good time to get him back and be healthy. But Rutgers is, I think, 5, 6, 7 seed in the tournament. So anytime you're going on the road to play a team of that caliber, it's going to be a challenge.
And do you see this Husker basketball team playing more free in recent weeks, though? It just feels like these freshmen have stepped into new, bigger roles, and they've been finding their footing. But it feels like every single game we watch, and I'm sure I'm going to say this now, and then we're going to have a performance tonight that's going to make me eat my words, but it feels like this team is just playing more freely than they have in the past. And it almost feels like they're not worried about what the end result is. They're more worried about the process during the game. That's something we've heard from the Husker football coaches too, but it feels like they're worried about the process during the game and just taking it possession by possession, and it leads to a more free-feeling performance.
Yeah, I certainly think some of that's chemistry, some of that's confidence. I think they're so limited with their rotation, and sometimes you like to be 9, 10, 11 deep, but I think players might play a little tight, thinking they have to play well to stay in rotation or keep their minutes up. And, there's just not a lot of places for Fred to turn. And I think that gives players confidence, and it certainly has helped, Tominaga. I think he's playing with a freedom and confidence, which is allowing other players to get shots and find success as you see teams are really starting to, try to double and step out on some of the screening actions, which would allow for us to rebound or slip and get easy baskets at the rim. So, having a player that's forcing teams to scout and game plan against, I think is helping, other players on the court find baskets. But, yeah, I like watching this team. They're not overly talented. I think Walker and Grease will give you a chance every night with leadership and, the ability to create some offense. And now that K-State is scoring, that gives us three good options, and I think it's allowing the freshmen to kind of get their feet and play with a little freedom and confidence as they're not having to score for us to be successful. That's coming from the other 3 players.
Andy, quickly, let's talk about that Tominaga impact, as his scoring has been just phenomenal over the past 3 games, and the outside shooting has really opened up the backdoor cutting, and Walker's done a great job from the high post, finding Tominaga cutting the back door and getting him some easy looks near the rim. And I just want to get your take on what's changed offensively for Nebraska over the past couple games to free up Tominaga. Has it just been a case of Tominaga getting hot at the right time, or has Fred been, in your eyes, changing some of the offensive sets, trying to get him some better looks?
Well, they are running more through K-State. I think early on they were posting Greasel and really giving Walker kind of that middle third of the floor to play out of it. And then he was kind of getting his assist off of backing, maybe down in the post where teams were having a double. Now they're running K-State off of a lot of misdirection, a lot of staggered doubles. It's forcing, teams to kind of hedge and jump out, which has really lifted the defense, which, has allowed other players to get some stuff at the rim. So, I think Fred has balanced the matchups, but now having, 3 good offensive weapons has given him some different, different strategies, not just having to have Greasel back down to get, against Creighton. That was kind of their go-to action, right? So he's been able to kind of mix in all 3 players and find different ways for them to score. But, when you have a player that can shoot it from 25, 26, 27 feet and play confidently, that has really opened the floor. And, I think Nebraska has benefited at the other spots from that.
Andy, I want to flip it over to another guy on Rutgers, and I personally think he's one of the more underrated players in the conference, and that's Cliff Amori, because he's averaging near a double-double, 9.8 rebounds per game and 13.5 points. He's 6'11". He's a freak athletically. How does he match up well against Derek Walker? And if you're Fred Hoiberg, what kind of defense do you run to stop a guy like him?
Well, I think that is the challenge with Walker playing against elite, opponents. Walker's 6'8", maybe 6'9", and he's gotten himself in foul trouble playing against the better centers in the league, especially versatile centers. So, I look for that. We're going to have to, find a way to defend him, and if we have to play Keita, and Walker, that takes away Walker kind of in the middle of the floor, right? Keita's got to be kind of on the low post, and that might change some things that Fred has to do offensively. Now, the other thing, Walker's done a really good job of being able to score against 6'11", 7-foot centers. I mean, even, Zach Edney and even Kalkbrenner from Creighton, you think 7'1", 7'2" would really bother him at the rim, but he has found ways to kind of the old school game where you use your body and kind of shoot a hook shot over the top and find ways to make bank shots in the lane. So I'll be anxious to see if Walker can score, but I'm more concerned what we do defensively, and if we have to play big, I think that limits some of Fred's creativity and what he can do offensively.
Andy Markowski is with us here, former Husker standout, and now you catch him on the sidelines for the Pius girls basketball team. And Andy, you talk about Derek Walker's game. It almost feels like that old man at the YMCA. I've gotten cooked a couple of times by that 40-year-old man at the YMCA. Can barely jump over a stack of books, yet he's still cooking me on the post. Just, has Fred found a post presence that you think, at least a style that can work moving forward in the Big Ten, or is he just caught lightning in a bottle with what Derek Walker can do with the ball?
Well, I think what makes Fred a good offensive coach is he is creative on what his players can do, right? I mean, Walker's skill set is unique to Walker. Keita, if you lose Walker, now you're going to play Keita or Wilhelm at your 4 and 5. I mean, they're going to have to run some different things or go into the portal and try to find a 6'8", 6'9" kid that can do some of the things that Walker did. So I don't see us running offense through our 5 man next season, but certainly give Fred credit that he's been able to kind of find some actions and some unique offensive sets that has maximized his players' skill sets. And I think each year that you look at your roster, you've got to kind of cater and make some adjustments to that. So I think Walker is kind of a unicorn. You don't see a lot of offenses playing through their 5-man, not only scoring, but you look at the amount of assists that Walker has. I think that he would be in the top 5 in the country for post players and assists, and that's just a credit to his unique skill set and Fred putting him in good positions to help the offense.
And it's kind of weird that I guess we're talking about the future of this Nebraska basketball program here with 5 games left, but Fred's shown some people a lot over the past couple of weeks. Now, I want to get your take. Is it too early to talk about the future? Is this still in question, or do you think Fred's back for another year?
Well, I think Fred was challenged by the administration to maybe make some changes to look at his program, what he wanted it to be. And, they hired some new assistants. I think Nate Linzer has come in and kind of ran Fred's defense, and I think we can all agree they're much improved defensively. I think the grit and the toughness that this group has played with this year, Nebraska fans have responded well to. I think their challenge is going out and replacing a couple, fifth-year seniors, which, they obviously hit on those kids. But the portal will give you the opportunity to go and find some pieces that fit. I do think Fred is back. I've seen enough progress where, the freshmen I think are solid, not great. I think you have to add some more talent into the program. But with Nebraska's NIL, I think we're a little ahead of the landscape there in football and basketball. So I'm optimistic that they can plug some transfers in and hopefully keep that same chemistry that the group had this year.
Andy, after tonight, the next 3 Nebrasketball games are back at PBA, and that's a place where this team's been pretty good this year. They're 9-3. How important is it for Nebraska, even if they don't get a win here tonight, at least put together, a competitive showing that gives you a little bit of positivity heading into that 3-game homestand?
Yeah, I think every game is important, right? I mean, this team has had good leadership. I think they've been competitive. Now they've lost by 12, 15, 18, 20, but those games, I feel their stretches were physically they've been competitive. They haven't been outmatched in prior years. But having that 3-game homestand, Minnesota is one of those teams in there. I don't think, Maryland, we were competitive for long stretches on the road, and, Michigan State, is good, but certainly is not in the top 3 or 4 in the league right now. So, I look for them to continually play good basketball, have a chance to win a couple of those home games. And, the crazy thing is they're only 3 games out of 4th place in the league. You look at that Purdue overtime loss, you get that win. You're kind of right in the middle of the pack, which, I think the Big Ten has shown to be a good league this year. Maybe not super top heavy, but very deep. And, if they can find 2 or 3 more wins here, they move off of that, really the play-in games on Wednesday and play that first game Thursday in the Big Ten tournament. And, they carry that momentum into, I don't know if the NIT is in play or not, but maybe, a postseason and give yourself a chance to add a couple pieces going into next year. So I've been happy. I think the program's shown progress. I would be disappointed if the bottom falls out here with 5 games to play. I think this team, likes competing, likes playing. I think Fred has their attention. I think they're locked into game strategy and scouting, which tells me they'll have a chance to win a couple games down the stretch here.
Andy, let's quickly flip it over to the women here before we get you out, as they took Michigan down to the wire on Sunday. That was following a disappointing home loss to Illinois, and they got 4 games left. Minnesota tomorrow night. You got Iowa looming on Saturday, trying to get a rematch after dropping a game by 4 a little earlier in the season. This Husker women's team, what's still on the line with 4 games remaining in the season?
Well, they're still right on the NCAA tournament bubble. I think the Nebraska Technology came out today and still had them in the last 4 in. They're getting a lot of credit for a really challenging schedule. The Big Ten has got 5 teams in the top 16 when the NCAA announced the first 16 seeds. But yeah, their margin is very small. They're going to have to win at Minnesota and Northwestern at home. They're going to have to probably either beat Iowa or at Illinois, and then probably go into the tournament. And it looks like they're going to be the 8th seed playing a really good Michigan State 9th seed. So they have to win. Losing the home Illinois game, it really hurt them having a 10-point lead in the third quarter. And then obviously Michigan, they were up 6 late. Which is the 12th team in the country. So this team can play with anybody. They just have not been able to put 4 quarters together to beat some of the top teams in the country. But, Iowa at home, I think they're expecting close to a sellout, so it should be a great atmosphere on Saturday. So if you're not planning on doing anything Saturday, come and support. If they could, win that game Saturday against Iowa, that might punch your ticket in, as, I think Iowa is projected to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Andy, last thought here before we get you out. The Pius girls, 2 games left tonight. Lincoln Northeast, and then Thursday, Lincoln High. What's at stake these final 2 games for the Pius girls, and what's district looking like?
Yeah, well, Class A is just loaded. So we do have a tough slate to finish here. Lincoln Northeast is really good. Lincoln High is, I think, 19-1. For us, it's a huge week. If we win 2, I think we have a chance to host a district game in Class A, our district 2 games. So you'd be a top 7 seed, which is so important to play at home in the postseason. So a lot still on the line, and we've had a tough last 10 games, but hopefully we can finish strong here and host districts with a chance to go to state against a pretty balanced Class A field. I think any team that make it to Lincoln this year in Class A has a chance to compete and have a chance to win a state title. So we're optimistic, but it starts tonight out in Lincoln Northeast.
Andy Markowski with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Andy, thanks for joining us today. Good luck to you. Good luck to the Pius girls tonight, and we'll talk to you next week, all right?
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Tuesday edition here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark filling in for Schmitty today, but Schmitty will be back tomorrow. He'll be actually back tonight for our local listeners. You can catch him on the call over on KFOR tonight as the Lincoln Southwest boys in action. 7:30 opening tip tonight. So Schmitty, he's on, what's the best way to call it? He's on chauffeur duty, as he's
on husband duty.
Husband duty, chauffeur duty, same way to put it. It's the same thing. He's taking his wife to a routine doctor's appointment, and he will be back tomorrow. But it's Connor and myself taking you through today. If you want to get connected with Connor or myself, you can give us a call into the studio here, 402-466-3776. That's 402-466-3776 or 800-825-5865. Give us a tweet at Herbal Essences for me. That is no underscores, no weirdness, no nothing, just at Herbal Essences.
Whoa.
Yes, like the hair care company, but the difference is it's Herbal with an E, not Herbal with an A. I guess Herbal with an A. It's Herbal. You pronounce the H and you put the E in there. Herbal Essences. And then for Connor Clark, you can find him at C_Clark_27 for Connor. Insert underscore joke here. I'm not creative enough to think of a good one, Connor, so
There were 26 of them before me, so I had to settle with 27.
Talking Nebraska basketball, we just finished up with Andy Markowski. If you missed that interview, you can catch it in podcast form following the show. You can also catch Mitch from back in hour one as Mitch dove into the walk-on program with us back in hour one. You can catch both those interviews in podcast form shortly following the show. But we're going to dive in with some thoughts from Fred Hoiberg, his Monday afternoon press conference talking Rutgers, Nebraska, what's on deck tonight out at the rack in Piscataway. And I'm glad we have Connor here because Connor is a college basketball nut. He's one of those guys that, says we sleep in April. Is that you? We sleep in May?
We sleep in May.
I guess it's called March Madness. And it ends, mid-April?
Not even. It ends like April 3rd.
Okay, so you'll sleep in it mid-April, we'll say.
I'll sleep on April 5th. How about that, just to be safe? Give myself a day of insurance.
So we'll get Connor's take on Rutgers here in just a second, but first, here's Fred Hoiberg saying he feels the team is ready for the challenge that awaits them in Piscataway tonight.
Yeah, they're really good, and the thing that is most impressive about Rutgers' defense is their activity and their ability to get deflections, and it's going to be very important. We can't just drive into a pile and expect to be able to complete passes. We have to come in under control, one less dribble, and make a simple play. They've got great length across the board, and they make it very difficult on you to score. So it's going to be an important game to take care of it. Have to take care of it early. We can't let them get out in transition and get easy baskets with careless turnovers, and we really have to value the ball. Our first half against Wisconsin, it can't happen like that. If we drive in there and expect to be able to make plays in traffic, it's going to be an ugly game, and it's going to get ugly early. So just have to take great care of the ball and hopefully get good shots up on the board every possession.
So there's Fred Hoiberg's preview of what Nebraska faces with Rutgers tonight. We're going to get Connor Clark's preview of what Nebraska faces with Rutgers tonight. As Connor, as I said, college basketball nut. You can check out Connor's podcast, Clark's Court, talking all things college basketball. Free plug for my boy Connor here. But Connor,
that's my Valentine's Day gift, I guess.
Sure, we'll go with that.
It's festive.
We'll go with that. Connor, what do you see with this Rutgers basketball team tonight and what Nebraska faces? We've talked a lot about Nebraska's home success, but Rutgers, to their credit, over the past couple of seasons, they've been pretty phenomenal at the rack as well.
Yeah, they've been really good at the rack, and unfortunately, it's actually no longer called the rack. It's Jersey Mike's Arena, but it'll always be called the rack. But you heard Fred say it in his presser that they deflect the ball like none other. They allow 59 points a game, which is at the top of the Big Ten Conference. And this is a big game for Rutgers as well because they're 16-9. They're coming off of not the most inspiring performance at Illinois. They had a 10-minute scoring drought out in Champaign over the weekend, and that was a big-time loss. And now they're deadlocked in a, 5-way tie at 8-6 in the Big Ten Conference. So a win here catapults them all the way up to Indiana Northwestern territory at 9 wins in the conference. So, they're playing for a lot. It's not like, here comes Nebraska. It's just kind of a rollover game. There's meaning to this for them. As for Nebraska, Hoiberg said it, you have to take care of the ball tonight. That's something that they did not do against Wisconsin in that first half especially. They didn't value the ball. They didn't make very smart decisions. The offense looked very stagnant at times, and I was in the building for that game, and it was just kind of, I don't want to say careless, but at times sloppy and just uninspiring basketball because, yes, Wisconsin was playing good defense, but Nebraska, they didn't really create good shots for themselves either, and you saw that. Now, obviously, Tominaga got hot in the second half, and that's kind of been the answer for this team in the past week or so, past couple of weeks, really. So how do you find that outlet of scoring outside of K-State because he can only do so much, right? So you need to have a Derek Walker, a Sam Greasel have big games. Maybe even a Jamarcus Lawrence every now and then step up and have a couple of buckets. He did that on Saturday. He was a big part of that. And then Blaise Keita's minutes obviously were of really, really quality because not only did he get a ton of rebounds offensively, his defense altered a lot of shots, especially inside and down the stretch. And Wisconsin just had a lot of trouble inside the paint going with that big lineup that Fred Hoiberg did. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that again here tonight.
Yeah, and Blaise was the guy that had his best career game as a Husker on Saturday. It might not show up in the stat sheet with only 2 points, but he did have 11 rebounds, so he was cleaning up the glass, and defensively, he was great. Fred Hoiberg hit on what Blaise brings to this team as a whole, and we can expect to see a little more of him moving forward.
Well, it allowed us to play really one-on-one in the post. And, Derek, we really have to do a good job of trying to protect him early in games. And we missed a couple very basic rotations early in that game. And, this is something going back to June that we put in with this defense is rotating out of the double team. And we just did not do a very good job in the first half. In the second half, what Blaise gives us is the opportunity to play one-on-one with the post up, and that kept us closer to their shooters and it did a much better job. And I think, the last 20 minutes of the game, we held them to 17 points. And, Blaise just did everything for us. He took a big charge late in the game. He had great hand activity on the post with his pressure, and he really rebounded the ball at a high rate. So, it was great to see him out there. He and Derek, obviously, that was a game we could go big with Wall at the 4 and with Crowell at the 5. We're not going to be able to do that every game, but, we certainly will have lineups out there where we're going to play big and, just throw maybe different defenses out there against it. But, I was really pleased with the way that lineup looked. We really went with 6 guys in the second half, and, it was a really fun afternoon, I think, for a lot of people in that building, and, just really proud of the effort our guys gave, and most specifically with Blaise.
So, Connor, do you think big is in the cards tonight?
I think so. I mean, might as well, because Keita was obviously prepared for that moment, and he played very quality basketball in that moment.
He looked healthy, too. It looked just like it was the difference between Coke and Diet Coke. Right. Where I think what we've been seeing over the past month or two from Blaise has been Diet Blaise. And we got closer to the real. Maybe it was Blaise Zero is what we got on
Blaise
Saturday.
Zero, I like that.
It's more similar, but it isn't quite the full bodied experience with the real sugar and whatnot in your Coca-Cola. It wasn't that, but you can see him slowly but surely getting back to at least what Husker fans, I think, expected from a guy who was the top JUCO post player in the country last season.
Yeah, we got what Husker fans expected from him. And the only bad play that he had was that little hook shot that was like 5 feet away from the basket where he could have just taken an extra dribble, either dunked it or laid it up and in. But, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see big, especially, and we talked about this with Andy Markowski as well, when you got a guy like Cliff Amori in there, too, who is 6'11", he can move like none other, and he's one of the more athletic players in this conference. So how do you lock him down? You're probably going to have to use double teams a lot, and that brings me to this point about rotations that Hoiberg had to say in that press conference. They missed or were slow on a couple of basic rotations he mentioned, and against a team like Rutgers, that is not an option. You cannot miss rotation against this team because you have Amori who averages 13.5, you have Cam Spencer who averages 12.5, and then below that you have 3 guys that all average 9. So you have 5 players that average at least 9 points a game, and if you leave one of those guys open, especially at the rack, they're going to make you pay. So rotations out of the double team cannot be missed tonight, or else, you heard Hoiberg say it, it's going to get ugly, and it'll get ugly early. So as long as you can, stay steady on the defensive side, because we talked about it on the show before, that's what travels in the Big Ten is defense. Mm-hmm. And if you can keep the Rutgers fans out of it for as long as you possibly can, because it gets loud in there, it's not a huge venue, that's going to be huge. So the big lineup with double teams and Amori and getting your rotations in on time and finding that offensive scoring outlet outside of Tominaga, those are really the 3 keys to success here tonight for Nebraska. The spread is 14, which is a little big, I think. I know Nebraska hasn't been good on the road at all, but 14 is a large spread. I think Nebraska could probably cover. But again, if they don't do those 3 things, I understand how it would get more than 14.
Well, the question with that line, I think, is Rutgers hungover? Are they fading following that loss to Illinois? Or is this going to be their bounce-back game, their get-right game against Nebraska? And, well, Fred Hoiberg spoke on that last thought here from Fred. He doesn't think that Rutgers is fading to finish this season.
No, I mean, listen, when you play 2 road games and, at Indiana and at Illinois, those are 2 of the harder places to play in the league, and both those teams are rolling right now. So, very competitive. They had a pretty significant lead in that game at Illinois before Illinois went on a big run in the second half. So it doesn't change anything. I mean, how hard it is to win on the road in this league, and I think you can just point to it, and it's as simple as that. We know they're going to have urgency, and we have to withstand the first run. The first 5 minutes are going to be very important tomorrow night in the game, because I know they're going to come out and play with great effort. They always do. It's what Peichel, it's what he does with his team. So, just a great opportunity for us. We got to go out there. We got nothing to lose. Just go out and play free and hopefully play well for 40.
And it's funny Fred mentions that first 5 minutes, because that's kind of where I've been at with Husker basketball. Less the first 5, more the first 8. Is where is Nebraska at the under 12 media timeout? That's just where I'm at with Husker basketball right now, and especially with this job here. We wrap up at 6. I'm doing a whole bunch of work following the show for an hour or 2, and then tonight I got high school basketball that I'm going to be producing. So it for me becomes all right, let's check in. What's Nebraska doing? It's the under 12 media timeout. Oh, they're down by 2. This is one that's going to be worth watching down the stretch here, see what they can do, rather than some games where it's been, they're down by 15 at the under 12 media timeout, a la the Michigan game from a week ago, where I go, you know what? It's just not their night. I'll wait for them to come back home.
Yeah, the first 5 minutes or the under 12, as you mentioned, has been really up or down, because at home, you see Nebraska play some of their best basketball in those first 5 to 10 minutes, and then on the road, you see them play some of their worst basketball in that first 5 to 10 minutes. The only exception to that was Penn State when they came back from 10-0 down. But, yeah, that's going to be a crucial part of tonight's game, especially with the environment at the rack.
So Nebraska-Rutgers tonight, that will be good stuff. We'll talk about the result tomorrow. After the break, we're going to talk Derek Carr, released by the Raiders today.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back in, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark with you here on this Tuesday afternoon, this rainy Tuesday afternoon, which doubles as Valentine's Day. That's secondary to me. I know my plans after the show include high school basketball and my bowling league. So that's my one true love. It's no woman for me. It's sport of bowling.
Just turkeys and 300s.
Yeah, I just got my my bowling balls resurfaced, actually. Nerd talk for a second. And the turkeys, I think I was really locked into what my balls were doing. That sounds wrong. What my bowling balls were doing pre-resurface.
This is why we can't do shows together.
The sophomore humor comes out. But then I got them resurfaced, and now they're unpredictable. Now, like, I throw them in a spot, I expect them to go right into the pocket, and then no, we're going Brooklyn, or we're getting ourselves just a nasty, brutal pickup that I leave for myself. So,
well, now I have a question. How many bowling balls do you personally own? Because I didn't know that you had bowling balls.
Oh, they're in my car right now. Just two. I was thinking about getting myself a third this winter, and then I went, you know what? Let's resurface these old balls, make them look like they're like new again, and that has not helped me thus far. So maybe a third bowling ball coming soon.
Well, before we get to Derek Carr, how much is, because I know nothing about bowling other than, hey, you get the shoes and you try and knock down as many, like, obviously you know how to bowl.
Yes.
But how much is like a bowling ball? Like, is that a pricey purchase?
It depends if you're in the high-end ball market. I personally go for the clearance rack and the used balls, which you can buy used bowling balls. I'll fill in the old holes and re-drill them for you. It's beautiful. So my first bowling ball was new. My second was used. But I tend to look somewhere in the price range, $100 to $150. You can usually get yourself a decent bowling ball. And if you're on the used rack, you can find yourself one for less than $100, somewhere in the 50 to 100 range. And I should note, I haven't truly dove into the world of bowling ball shopping since inflation and all this stuff we're seeing recently. So maybe that price has gone up, but I would say realistically you get yourself one for a little over $100.
Well, I guess I learn something new every day.
Where they get you though, the bowling alleys, it's the shoes. Go if you just go bowling once every couple weeks, once a month, go buy yourself a pair of bowling shoes. You can continue renting the ball from whatever bowling alley you go to, but like you can get a pair of bowling shoes like $40. You're going to save yourself money if you end up going bowling, what would that be, 10 times? with those shoes. You'll end up saving yourself money. There's Elijah Herbel's advice for the day, as I see our listenership is probably just waning significantly. People changing the station as we talk bowling. I love bowling, okay, guys? But we'll move on and we'll talk some NFL quarterback carousel as the first move kicked off the quarterback carousel today as the Raiders did what was expected. It sounds like they were trying to find a trade partner for Derek Carr. Derek Carr said, you know what? I don't want your trade partner. I want to go into the free agency market. So the Raiders officially releasing Derek Carr today just before his $40 million incentive kicks in for being on the roster. So he loses out on $40 million, but he does get to pick his next stop. And it really kicks off what could be it won't be as exciting as last offseason with what we had with Russell Wilson, all the Aaron Rodgers intrigue. We're going to get another offseason of Aaron Rodgers intrigue here, but it does kick off what should be an intriguing quarterback carousel.
It should be, and is it wrong of me to think that this has Indianapolis Colts written all over it?
For Derek Carr?
Yeah.
I was thinking Carolina Panthers.
That is also very realistic. I mean, well, if Tom Brady didn't retire, that's what everybody was saying. He was going to go to the Colts because they just like to have one-year rentals now, but yeah, the Panthers is definitely a destination for him. The Colts, obviously, you know, they had injuries too, and I'm not going to discount that, but that's definitely a landing spot. I mean, it'll be interesting because I'm curious to see how much do NFL teams, how much value do they put in Derek Carr right now? Because he's struggled recently. He's still a more than capable starting quarterback in the NFL. But how much value as a fan, too, how much do you put into him? Because as a Bronco fan, too, for you see him a lot more than I do as a Bears fan. So how much value would you put into him?
He's a quarterback, in my opinion, that is good enough to lead you to the playoffs, but he's not good enough to go win you a Super Bowl. That's the best way I'd put it, is if you surround the right roster around him, Derek Carr can be very successful. Derek Carr can lead you to the postseason. I don't think Derek Carr will ever be that high-level quarterback that's going to go win you a Super Bowl, be the guy. So it fits for those teams that are looking for, you know what, we have a good roster in place. We just need the quarterback that's going to take us to the next level. What does, and this is where my mind goes, what does San Francisco think they have with Brock Purdy? Coming off an elbow injury, you thought maybe you had the guy. Are they going to be in the market for a guy like Derek Carr? Because with the roster they have there, I think Derek Carr is a slight upgrade on Jimmy Garoppolo, I think. Could that be in play? And also, San Fran, it's warm weather. Did you hear this? The Raiders leaking out. This is via The Athletic's Vic Taffer, who covers the Raiders. He's the beat writer for the Raiders for The Athletic. It was leaked out to him that the Raiders believe that Carr wasn't tough enough to hang in the pocket or play well in cold weather. And that's one of the reasons why that they're moving on, is that they don't think that he's tough enough to make it in the NFL.
Well, I'd love to see him go play in Seattle then, if he's going to go to the Niners and play a critical game in late November, because that's not warm. I'll tell you that much. I get it, San Francisco. I don't know how much stock to put into that. That's a good question, though, because I mean, San Francisco, you have Brock Purdy, who I think he proved his worth for the most part. Like, he could be a quarterback in this league. Now, it's a matter, does everybody just kind of figure him out, and how much progression does he make? I also think that the Jimmy Garoppolo hate is a little much. I still think Jimmy Garoppolo is still a pretty good quarterback. Now,
well, I almost put him, he's on a tier just below Derek Carr, in my opinion, where he's almost in that same mold of, he's a guy, you know what, you put a good enough team around him. I think that's a guy that's good enough to lead you to the postseason. I don't think you're going to be winning a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, as we saw a couple of seasons ago whenever they went up against Kansas City. The wheels fell off for Jimmy Garoppolo in the second half, and the Chiefs are able to come back and go win that football game. So I kind of put him and Derek Carr in the same situation, or the same mold there, but I think that what I've seen from Derek Carr with the Raiders, and maybe it's just because I've seen him more being a Broncos fan, I think he just got the slight leg up on Garoppolo.
I mean, I think that's a fair point to make, but again, we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo go to the bowl. Now, I obviously didn't win, and you also see how it ended up playing out with Trey Lance too, because I know we got Hurts, But when he was in the game versus when Jimmy Garoppolo was in the game, the Niners, I thought, were a lot better of a football team.
And then you get the report out there that following the performances from Brock Purdy, that San Fran locked in as Brock Purdy as being their guy moving forward. And maybe the elbow injury changes some things for them, but they saw enough out of him that they said, you're better than what we have in Trey Lance. You're our guy for the future, at least reportedly.
I mean, I don't know what you've seen as a football fan. This goes for anybody. I don't know what you've seen from Trey Lance so far that can really convince you that he is the guy going forward. Like, I really don't, because he hasn't gotten the opportunity because of injuries, but when he's in there, doesn't look that great. I mean,
you want to hear a fun stat?
Yes.
Tom Brady, his final season in the NFL this past year, threw more attempts than Trey Lance had his entire career, high school, college, and pro. Tom Brady had more passing attempts last season alone.
Wow. That is mind blown. I will say, too, because this is the Bears fandom coming out of me, Justin Fields did beat Trey Lance one-on-one in a monsoon.
It's got to be nice for you to be watching the quarterback carousel and not worrying about what your team's going to be doing. You guys have your guy, I think.
Just got to worry about what they're going to do with a pick.
So the first domino on the quarterback carousel kicks off. Maybe Aaron Rodgers, his darkness retreat later this week. Maybe a second domino kicks off as Rodgers maybe decides where he wants to go. We'll finish up the show after the break. It's Hail Varsity Radio.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at hailvarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up a Tuesday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. It's Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark taking you through this show today. Schmitty out today, back tomorrow, as we'll be back 4 to 6 on your Wednesday. As tomorrow we're going to have our usual suspects, Mike Babcock joining us, Mike Schuhart joining us, and to be determined. Other than that, we'll have to get connected with Schmitty. I got it somewhere in my phone. We have a 505 as well, but
there's something. There's something happening.
How professional of a show closes this one. Schmitty knows who we got at 505 tomorrow. We'll get his take. Schmitty back again at 4 to 6 tomorrow afternoon, and I'm sure he'll let us know what interviews we got planned for hour 2 on your Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Before we get out of here today, though, Connor saw a guy I respect in the college football national media. His name is Josh Pate. If you know him, he hosts The Late Kick with Josh Pate. I know Connor is shaking his head in acknowledgement. You know who Josh Pate is. I think he's more popular maybe among the younger generation. He's a guy who's been covering college football for a long time. He's had his Josh Pate tour this season where he went on to different college football venues. A lot of ones he's wanted to see a Southern guy. So I always like and respect his opinion regarding Nebraska because he's kind of out of this bubble that we have here, this Husker media bubble of what's going on. And he gave his take on Husker football, why he thinks Matt Rule was the correct hire for Husker football, as well as what he thinks the ceiling could be for Matt Rule now that he's seen a couple months of the Matt Rule tenure, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the recruitment of Dylan Raiola and Nebraska kind of shooting high. So he gave his take on why he thinks Matt Rule and Nebraska could be the right marriage and why he thinks he could see Nebraska back into national prominence, sooner rather than later.
The popular sentiment is Nebraska can never win at a high level again. I think we got to very clearly define what we mean by this. Are they going to be a dynasty in college football again? No, I don't believe that's possible. I know it's hardly possible for anyone, so especially Nebraska. But is it possible for them to win? Could we ever see Nebraska play for a national title? I'm not ready to say no on that. And the reason is because I think the sport is sort of coming to them a little bit. I think the sport, people are going to misuse TCU as an example, but what allowed TCU to just do what they did, and then adding in the benefit of the transfer portal era, it actually, I think, makes it statistically a little more likely that if you have the right head coach there, you could have a year or two where they just, for whatever reason, the ingredients come together. I don't think, I'm not trying to sell you on the idea that Nebraska could go on a prolonged run where they average 10 wins a season for a decade. That is asking way too much of almost any program, much less Nebraska. But they just signaled something to you. Matt Rule's the head coach there. and they had to fight to get him. They could have mailed it in. They could have gone and hired an also-ran. They could have guaranteed themselves bowl eligibility and just kind of resigned themselves to the idea that good enough is enough. They're not doing that. So credit Nebraska, and let's see what they do.
So there's Josh Pate with your dose of national media realism for the day. That's why I respect Josh. It's a very reasonable take. Kind of, it's closer to what my views are on Husker football than a lot of other people. So that was a good way to close the show today. We'll be back tomorrow, 4 to 6. Check out the podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you tomorrow.